In the following, I'd like to give an overview of the different features and modules of the One Identity Manager SAP support. The One Identity Manager SAP support consists of the One Identity Manager SAP connector and the SAP HANA connector. The SAP connector contains the following modules and add-ons. The SAP R3 base module provides SAP user and role management capabilities and R3 content data connection features. Basic SAP account lifecycle management is performed by this module for direct as well as CUA connections. The SAP R3 compliance add-on sits on top of a basis configuration and provides compliance-related capabilities. It provides the capability for SAP role and profile content analysis and segregation of duties. Transactions, authorization objects, org fields, and values will be analyzed for rule checking by this add-on. The SAP R3 Analysis Authorization add-on sits on top of the basis configuration and provides SAP BI Analysis Authorization Management capabilities. The R3 Structural Profiles add-on provides support for sub-HCM structured profiles. When we look into the details, we can see that different add-ons add different content and capabilities to the system. For example, the SAP Basis knows about systems versus clients and about SAP roles and users. So as you can see, subsystem versus submandant. Mandant is the German word for client. The CA support adds additional information about SAP users and on which clients these users are provisioned. Sub-user in submandant is the table that will provide this information. The compliance add-on provides additional to the rights and authorization editor to create SAP functions to be used in compliance rules to evaluate toxic permission combinations. The HR add-on will provide capabilities around personnel planning data and structural profiles and will provide the capability to write back data to the SAP HR system. A very common request we get from HR departments is the lack of information backflow from enterprise systems. The HR department does not get employee-related communication data back from other systems. One Identity Manager's SAP connector is capable of writing back this information into SAP HR. This is the only write operation to the SAP HR system and will only affect the info type communication data. Further looking into the detail, the system will reveal that One Identity Manager's connector also takes the visibility of objects into account. There are system-wide objects like licenses, parameters, printers, and there are client-wide objects like user accounts, user groups, roles, and profiles. When we look into the CA, we will see that the synchronized system is a SAP CA central client, and it managed 4 CA child systems. 3 child systems are on the same system. In this environment, the system is T03, and 1 child system that is on a different system, here the system T01. In order to connect to an SAP system, we first need to prep the environment. The first step here is to check the SAP kernel version. We are interested in the release version of the installed SAP kernel, whether the installed system is a Unicode system or not, and the name of the database. Once we have verified that the system is being supported by the SAP connector, we need to apply the One Identity Manager BAPI modules to the client we are going to connect to. In order to do this, we need to import transport files. These transport files will be provided with the One Identity Manager software distribution and can be imported using the SAP transaction STMS. This transaction requires special permissions and will normally be performed by the SAP base team of the customer. When the SAP transport management system is being started, the information about the system and the transport domain will be displayed. Again, this will be performed by the SAP admins and is only required once for the client. In the following process, the import queue can be selected and the transport packages can be added to the queue. The import of transports are performed by requests, going to the extras menu, other requests, add, and then the system will show the list of available transport packages on the system. OneIdentity provides 4 packages. After selecting the transport package, it will be added to the queue. Now from the queue, the transport package can be selected and additional detailed information can be provided, like the target client on the system, when to import this package, and additional information. Some transport packages might have warnings that can safely be ignored. As you can see, the 4 packages provided by OneIdentity Manager are sub-repository. The sub-repository creates the VIA eNet namespace in the SAP system repository. The subtable defines the table structure for VIA eNet users and the SAP system dictionary. The sub-transport contains the functions defined in the namespace. There's a Unicode and a non-Unicode version of the transport. Select the transport package that suits your SAP system. Lastly, the SAP role contains a convenience role for ease of use. This role can be assigned to the service account and will contain all the necessary permissions for the connector. Sometimes customers do not want to use the provided SAP role, but create their own role. For this case, the required permissions are described in detail in the SAP connector documentation. Once we have the OneIdentity Manager module installed on the client, we need to create a service account for the OneIdentity Manager connector. To create a user in SAP, use the transaction suser1 and provide the username to create and click the create icon. Using the user creation dialog, the details of the service account can be provided. A specific detail is the user type to verify. For production systems, the user type will be most likely system. For development systems, create a user type of a dialog. This will allow you to log in this user using the sub-GUI and check if there are any issues with the user's permissions if necessary. And don't forget to assign the service account the required permission. If you have imported the sub-role transport provided by the OneIdentity Manager installation package file, the role name is VIA eNet sync. If the customer has decided to create his own role, please use that role. Now that the SAP client has been prepared, we need to configure the synchronization with OneIdentity Manager. In OneIdentity Manager's connector configuration tool, the synchronization editor, create a new synchronization project. From the list of available connectors, please select the SAP connector and follow the instructions of the configuration wizard. The SAP R3 connection type screen is of special interest for the configuration of the different connection options for the different deployments of an SAP system. Here you can select if you want to connect directly to an application server or access the system via a router, or if you need to connect through a messaging server. In most cases, it will be the application server, so it is a direct connection. If a message server is used, you will get the detailed information from the SAP basis administrators. Depending on the selected options, the next screen will ask for different information. Here in this case, it is a direct connection to an application server or a router, and the information for this kind of a connection are being required. These are the host name or IP address of the host or the router, the system number, and the system ID. The necessary information, once again, will be provided to you by the SAP base admins. OneIdentity Manager also supports an SNC connection to the SAP system. Secure Network Communication, or SNC, protects the data communication paths between various clients and server components of the SAP system that use the SAP protocols RFC or DIAC, and provides single sign-on capabilities with external systems like, for example, Active Directory. SNC implements well-known cryptographic algorithms to encrypt the communication. Finally, the client-specific information are required. The client ID of the client that are going to be managed from OneIdentity Manager, as well as the service account name and the password. Once the information are entered, a connection test can be performed. If the connection succeeds, the next steps of the connector configuration can be performed. Here the information, if this client is a central user administration central client instance, can be configured by checking the box. OneIdentity Manager's SAP connector can be extended if needed. It is very common that customers have extended the SAP standard schema and have added custom tables and attributes. These so-called Z tables might contain relevant information that needs to be maintained via One Identity Manager. The One Identity Manager connector provides the capability to extend the existing schema with additional schema objects and attributes. The schema extension file is an XML document that describes the additional schema objects and the different methods to list, read, or write the information. A sample XML schema extension file can be found in the One Identity Manager SAP documentation. Schema extensions can be provided by support or by experienced delivery persons. Once the basic connectivity to the SAP system is being established, the SAP synchronization template must be selected. In an identity management system, the essential information that needs to be synchronized are the identities and the organizational structure. SAP HCM provides the HR and OM data that can be used in One Identity Manager to represent the enterprise's organizational structure and the employee or identity data in One Identity Manager. In order to synchronize the HCM data, the SAP R3 HCM employee objects template needs to be selected. This will create the synchronization template with the required schema objects and attributes and the mappings between these objects and attributes in SAP and One Identity Manager. If a write back of communications data is not required, the connection can be configured as read-only. In the case of a read-write configuration of the SAP HCM template, only the info type 105 communications data will be written back to the SAP HCM. In this case, each email address or phone number change in the identity management system will be provisioned to the SAP HCM system. When the configuration has been finished, the project template can be saved and activated. This will create a synchronization configuration, including a schedule that can be activated for periodic synchronization of HCM data. Now that the synchronization for HR and OM data has been configured, let's have a look into the data in SAP HR and how the data is represented in SAP. We have to understand the structure and data model of the SAP HR and OM in order to understand the implications of this model in the One Identity Manager data model. To start with, let's have a look into the data model of organizational units in SAP. In SAP OM, the enterprise structure consists of multiple objects. The building blocks of organizational management are also called SPOC. S stands for position, for example, customer services representative for region South or for region Southeast. P stands for person, this is the employee representation. O stands for organizational unit or org unit, it represents the department in a company. C stands for job, for example, customer services representative. The job describes a job class like customer service representative or pre-sales architect. The position, however, is a specific instance of a job like customer services representative for region South or for region Southeast or pre-sales architect 1 or pre-sales architect 2. It is the specific opening linked to an organizational unit. The position is an instance of the job in a specific organizational unit. In SAP OM, employees or persons are not assigned directly to an organizational unit, but to positions. With the one-to-one linking of a position to an organizational unit, the employee or person is indirectly assigned to the organizational unit. A position that is linked to a specific organizational unit can be marked as head of own organization. Any person occupying this position will be the department manager or the head of the organizational unit. An organizational unit can contain other organizational units. The position is being assigned to an organizational unit and is an instance of a job. A cost center can be assigned to an organizational unit or to a position as a master cost center. A person can be assigned to a position. Each relationship is reflected by a number like 002 for a hierarchical assignment between organizational units or 002 for an assignment of position to an organizational unit. The relationship numbers are preceded by an A or B for the direction of the link. From an identity manager perspective, a position can be considered as the primary business role. There's some discussion whether it's the job or position, but if we assume the position is the primary business role, we have to consider some special cases. In SAP OM, a person can occupy a position partially. During the assignment, a percentage can be provided. This way, a position can be shared by 2 or more persons. This is going to become interesting for the position marked as head of its own organizational unit. Special configuration needs to be applied in this case. In SAP, there are some org management transactions we should be aware of. The organization and staffing menu contains the following transactions. PPO-CE will allow the creation of organizational units. PPO-ME will allow the modification of organizational units like renaming, assigning other positions to the organization unit, etc. And PPO-SE, which is the one that is most relevant to us, is to display the information of an organizational unit. To review the organizational unit setup, please use this transaction. That we looked into the organizational units data model, let's look into the person or employee representation in SAP HCM. SAP's data model for employees is comprised of the main employee record, which contains basic employee information and additional records in so-called info types. For example, an employee personal data and address information are stored in a different info type, or his bank details are stored in a separate info type. This provides great flexibility to the system and auditing historization capabilities. For example, if an employee changes his organizational assignment or his bank account number, a new entry will be created with the new information and marked as active, and the old information is still available for reference. Here is an incomplete list of the info types. The list of information stored in the SAP HR is complete and contains more information than needed in an identity access governance system. We don't need to know an employee's bank details or basic pay or payroll status information. This is relevant for HR operations, but not from an IGA perspective. Some others, on the other hand, might be interesting depending on the customer's requirements, like leave information, etc. One Identity Manager's default permission will not fetch information on info types that are not directly needed for the operations of Identity Manager. Often customers are concerned that the service account might see more than needed. The connector is not accessing other information, and the permissions are not allowing to access those sensitive information. Now, as explained previously, the info types contain the current and all previous entries about an employee. Each info type record contains a validity start and a validity end date. In this example, the employee has two records in the organizational assignment info type. This is the info type 001. The first organizational assignment record starts in June 1999 and ends on October 2000. And the second record starts on October 2000 and ends on December 31st, 9999. December 31st, 9999 is the last day in every record in SAP. I hope there are still SAP experts around when we reach that date, otherwise we will have another year 10K problem. How are these records being created? SAP delimits or ends the previous record the day before the new record takes effect. When an HR admin enters a new record, the system automatically delimits or ends the currently active entry by putting the day before the new record takes effect as the validity end date, and puts the validity end date of the new record to December 31st, 9999, if not specified otherwise. The system ensures that no two records can be valid for the same time period. In this example, at hire date, a permanent address record for the employee will be created with the validity end date of December 31st, 9099. This is the black arrow at the bottom of the slide. Sometime later, the employee moves to a new address. The HR department creates a new permanent address record effective immediately. This will lead to the ending of the previously active record on the day before, and the new record will be set active until December 31st, 9999. This is the vertical red line interrupting the black line at the bottom and the horizontal red line depicting the new valid entry. Sometime later, the employee announces to the HR department that he's going to move to a new address on the 1st of the next month. The HR department creates a new permanent address record effective on the 1st of the next month. This will again lead to the ending of the previously active record on the last day of this month, and the new record will be set active from the 1st of next month until December 31st, 9999. This is the vertical green line interrupting the red. This is also called future dated event. At any time, there's only one active record in the system, but the system can contain past as well as future events. All this information is stored in the info type table, and it is the connector's responsibility to fetch the currently active or valid entry from this list. OneIdentity Manager's SAP connector handles these info types and always fetches the currently active entry from SAP. However, sometimes these future dated events are of interest to some of our customers as well. In case they want to run workflows in OneIdentity Manager before some entry is becoming active, OneIdentity Manager provides the capabilities to analyze these future dated events and the ability to act on these future dated events. For example, if an employee is going to move department in 2 weeks, a special workflow can be triggered depending on the customer's requirements. SAP has some personal administration transactions you should know of. The HR Master Data menu contains the transactions. The most common or interesting from an identity governance perspective we should be aware of are PA20 to display personal data and PA30 maintain personal data. Be aware of that. Now, how is the SAP data mapped into OneIdentity Manager schema? The employee or person object in SAP is represented by the schema object HR employee _ active and will be mapped to the person object in OneIdentity Manager schema. Some attributes are personnel number, primary department, first and last name, etc. There are others. The HR person 0041, so info type 0041 date specifications, is mapped to person in OneIdentity Manager schema. Some attributes here that are mapped are entry date, leaving date, technical entry date. The HR person 105 info type, this is info type 105 communication data, is mapped to the SH person ComData object in OneIdentity Manager schema. Some of its attributes are account or email. The HR org unit schema object is mapped to the department in OneIdentity Manager schema. Some attributes here are object ID and department name. And the HR org unit manager schema object is mapped to the department in OneIdentity Manager schema as well. It will set the department manager information. This mapping is set up out of the box and does not require any configuration. Now, when we look into details in the schema objects and into the synchronization editor tool from OneIdentity Manager, we can see the available information for our synchronization. In the case of HR org unit, which is mapped to department in OneIdentity Manager, we can see the validity start date, end date, the change date, and the object ID of the organizational unit. This is the unique key in the SAP system. As you might remember from the previous slides, in the SPOC model, O represents the organization, so the object ID is prefixed with an O. When we look at the HR org unit manager, which represents the information who is the department manager, we will see the triple of objects needed to resolve this: the org unit ID, the position ID, and the employee ID. The HR employee active schema object contains the active employees. Here we can see fields like employee's full name, personnel number, his position, etc. You can also see more details in the HR employee active schema object. The fields are grouped by the info types the connector has accessed. You can see the attributes coming from info type 0032, internal data, and info type 105, communications data. The synchronization editor will show all the attributes with the values from all the accessed info types. Since the connector does resolve the currently active entry automatically, the past or future entries for a person are not mapped and for that reason not automatically visible in the default list of mapped schema objects. The information is, however, available to the connector if needed. In this example, the full schema is displayed, and in the schema object HR person in org, we can see that all organizational assignments of a person. This information can be mapped and synchronized if the customer has a specific use case. As you can see here, that the dummy test user has 3 entries in HR person in org, and these are marked with different validity dates. In the extended schema, all available positions can be viewed as well. Depending on the customer requirements, these positions can be synchronized as primary business roles of employees. The schema object HR person 0709, info type 0709 person ID identifies employees with multiple records or contacts. This will allow to synchronize employees with multiple work contacts into individual person objects in one identity manager and to establish the relationship between them using master sub-identities.